This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hong Kong chief says central government will not back down from its plans for a national security law. A French court orders Rwandan genocide suspect Felicien Kabuga to be tried at a UN tribunal. And children from Shine Kibra TV in Kenya report on the importance of hand washing in preventing COVID-19. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Uche Okronko with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thanks, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Nigeria backs the re-election bid by the president of the African Development Bank. And Nissan raises concerns about maintaining its commitment to the EU without a Brexit deal. Of course, more on that are coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. Now, Hong Kong's chief executive says Beijing will not back down on its proposed national security law for the region. Carrie Lam is in the Chinese capital discussing the legislation. She met with Chinese Vice Premier Han Zheng, who emphasized Beijing's determination to finalize the law. Some 3 million Hong Kong residents have signed a petition backing the legislation, but some critics worry it will threaten the city's freedoms. Liu Yang tells us more.
It's been just 1 week since the National People's Congress passed the decision on May 28th. Today, Hong Kong SAR Chief Executive Carrie Lam and her team arrived in Beijing for exchanges with the central government about their opinions concerning the new legislation. Carrie Lam said the government put great emphasis on hearing the Hong Kong SAR government's opinion. They were the first group to put forward their ideas with the central government at a meeting chaired by Chinese Vice Premier Han Zheng.
咁當然我哋一行人嚟呢係表達我哋嘅意見啦。
We are to express our opinions today and will fully cooperate with the central government around the legislating work. In addition to seeking Hong Kong SAR government's opinions, later the central government will also listen to the chairman of the Hong Kong Legislative Council and Hong Kong's deputies to the National People's Congress. People from all walks of life are also encouraged to express opinions. I, therefore, call on people from various sectors in Hong Kong to communicate with the Hong Kong SAR government and liaison office of the central government in Hong Kong regarding this subject.
Carrie Lam said she had to admit that Hong Kong has not been able to stabilize the region.
Despite the faith put in the Hong Kong SAR to enact local legislation to safeguard national security, we could not do it.
Are you prepared?
And as a chief executive, and I have to confess that with the current legislative council and the political climate in Hong Kong, there's no way that in the foreseeable future that we could do it.
She expressed the confidence in Hong Kong's future development after having the new national security law, even if countries sanction Hong Kong.
Hong Kong's unique position is a result of the one country, two systems and the basic law. It's because we are an independent tariff region. Various freedoms granted by law and the financial center. I don't see how sanctions can influence Hong Kong.
During the press conference, Carrie Lam also said that Hong Kong SAR needs to establish its own legislative mechanism and strengthen its own law enforcement capacity. She also said that Hong Kong had witnessed the rampant activities of Hong Kong independence organizations and violent radicals, as well as blatant interference by external forces. The decision aims to prevent, stop, and punish acts and activities endangering national security and to help the city to restore peace and security. Liu Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
Hong Kong's financial secretary weighs in on the U.S. threat of sanctions and the region's stability.
As we all know that the Hong Kong dollar is pegged into the US dollar.
Yeah.
Will that be changed?
No, we are very determined to keep this linked exchange rate system and to defend this linked exchange rate system. This system was put in place back in 1983 In fact, the U.S. Hong Kong Policy Act was promulgated in 1992, 9 years after this linked exchange rate system. So they are independent of each other. It is a system designed by us. A system, if we want to upkeep, the most fundamental is our own determination and our ability to uphold this system. If I may share with you some figures, in terms of foreign exchange reserve, we have over 440 billion US, which is more than twice of our monetary base. Apart from that, we have a swap arrangement with the People's Bank of China. They are willing to do Hong Kong dollar, US dollar swap with us. With such a strong support, I think we would be more than able to defend any attack on our currency.
Hong Kong used to be a bridge or gateway to China, right?
Yes.
But right now, China is opening up more and more, and some say that they don't need Hong Kong's special status as a bridge anymore, right? So how do we maintain this appeal as an international financial city?
Well, the central government has time and again reaffirmed one country, two systems for Hong Kong. It is in the best interest of Hong Kong, and also it serves the interests of the country very well. Going forward, I think we will still be able to play a very useful role. It is important for us to play to our strength to serve the country. A case in point lately is that under the Sino-US tension, the US seems to be applying pressures on mainland companies listed on their stock exchanges. 2 years ago, we prepared for mainland companies listed overseas to seek secondary listing in Hong Kong. And we are very happy to see Alibaba came back last year, Jingdong coming back this year. So in the IPO pipeline, in the secondary listing pipeline, we see very encouraging response. This is a very good example to demonstrate what we can do for the country, but at the same time, benefiting ourselves.
Over to the U.S., where protests continue against the death of an unarmed African-American man in police custody. In the city of Minneapolis, where George Floyd was killed, the mother of his 6-year-old daughter held a press conference calling for justice.
At the end of the day, they get to go home and be with their families. Shiana does not have a father. He would never see her grow up, graduate. He would never walk her down the aisle. If it's a problem she's having and she needs her dad, she does not have that anymore. I'm here for my baby. And I'm here for George because I want justice for him.
And former NBA player Stephen Jackson also attended the press conference. He was a close friend of Floyd and said he was ready to get justice for him. Protests against the killing of George Floyd have been boiling over and spreading across the U.S. There have been over 9,000 arrests in the country as of Wednesday morning. Thousands gathered in London to show their support for George Floyd. Many wore red masks and chanted, "No justice, no peace." Some waved banners with slogans saying racism is a global issue. This is the second large Black Lives Matter rally in the UK over the past 4 days. The British Prime Minister said he supported lawful protests in a socially distanced way as the country is still trying to contain COVID-19. Meanwhile, protesters from the Black Solidarity Action Campaign staged a peaceful picket outside South Africa's parliament in Cape Town. The protesters say they are in solidarity with demonstrators in the United States over police brutality, the death of George Floyd. But they were also making a stand against violence in South Africa by law enforcement forces during the coronavirus lockdown.
I think it's really important to show some kind of support and for all of us to stand against something that we know is not right.
We are here because of George Floyd. We are here to make a statement. We are here because we don't matter, and we will not stop until we do matter.
In Nigeria, police have arrested a suspect in connection with the rape and murder of a 22-year-old student in Edo State. Uwela Omozua was raped and killed while studying at the local church. As CGTN's Deji Batmos tells us, the case has triggered protests in the country and on social media, with many, including celebrities, demanding for justice for the victim.
It's at this church just close to her home that Uwela Omozua was reportedly raped and killed. The alleged instrument of the attack was this blood-stained fire extinguisher. The gruesome murder has triggered a wave of protest, both online and on the streets. Among those who took to social media to demand justice for Uwela and other girls killed under controversial circumstances over the past month are top celebrities like actress and producer Genevieve Nnaji. She and many others are demanding justice for Uwela, Tina, a 16-year-old who was shot by the police, and Jennifer, another girl who was gang-raped and killed in the northwestern Kaduna state. Others calling for justice for the victims are actress Kate Henshaw and rapper and songwriter Falz, who took to Twitter to condemn the attacks. Even prominent politicians, including the former governor of Lagos State, Bola Tinubu, have added their voice to the calls for justice. On Twitter, President Buhari sent his condolences to the parents of Uwela and ordered the police to bring the culprits to justice. On the streets, students of the university Uwela attended have been protesting, demanding action following the rape and murder of their colleague. The governor of the state has promised that relevant agencies will act and bring all suspects to book.
We must track down the killers because it's gruesome, it's sheer madness. Why would you go to a church and rape a young girl? I mean, it's the height of criminality.
The police have arrested a suspect and say investigations are moving swiftly.
With this arrest of this suspect, we know that something will come up, something useful that could lead to the arrest of the members of this gang. We want to appeal to the good people of Edo State and the general public to remain calm, that justice will be done in this case.
The head of the Nigerian police has now set up a special team led by senior police officers to probe the case. Many Nigerians are shocked and angered by the rape and killing of Uwela. They hope their protest will jolt law enforcement agencies to act and prevent such crimes in the future. Deji Batmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, authorities in Zimbabwe are reinforcing COVID-19 restrictions following an increase in new cases. Thousands of commuters and motorists have been turned back from Harare city center as security forces cleared the area this week. Soldiers and police at checkpoints are only allowing essential service workers to proceed to the capital city's central business district. Shops have also been closed and the rest of the public advised to stay home. Almost 200 more cases were recorded in the country in May, a majority of them being citizens returning from abroad. So far, 4 people have died. In late March, a lockdown was imposed banning large gatherings. The government also ordered the closure of businesses with the exception of food shops. However, some of the restrictions were eased last month, allowing large corporations to operate under strict safety conditions for workers and customers. The government says that it has not changed lockdown regulations, but it is only enforcing pronounced gazetted regulations.
They are searching the cars, and if you do not have the permit or a letter, you are not allowed to pass. So it's now difficult to give a lift to someone who is not in possession of a letter. The queue is too long and they are taking long to clear us, and it's difficult to get into town.
The car that I was in was turned back and we had to get out.
The Tunisian government will deploy more Chinese drones across the North African country to help curb the spread of COVID-19 after 4 drones were successfully used in anti-epidemic operations in the capital Tunis. The Ministries of Health and Agriculture have announced that hundreds of Chinese drones will be deployed in the next phase of the technology-driven project. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi has the details.
Tunisian authorities have presented the new Chinese drones that will be deployed in 24 regions across the country to help in the fight against the coronavirus.
We are relying on Chinese technology in this large-scale project. It proved its efficiency in China to stop the spread of the virus in Wuhan. I hope that Tunisia will succeed, just like China, in stopping the virus by using innovative tools.
Following the evaluation of the first phase of the project, the COVID-19 task force has authorized the use of more DJI drones.
We're also working on developing new economic and investment projects based on Chinese skills that we hope will serve the interests of the people of the two countries. The success of the drone project proves once again that any project with China is successful.
The Minister of Agriculture has added that Tunis and Beijing aim to further boost their partnership in agriculture, industry, trade and scientific research.
The Tunisian-Chinese technological cooperation has been strengthened. We heavily rely on Chinese expertise and know-how in many sectors.
Prime Minister Lesotho Farfar said Tunisia is grateful to China for its support in the fight against COVID-19. Farfar made the remarks during his meeting with the Chinese ambassador to Tunisia, Wang Wenbin, at the government palace. Prime Minister Lesotho Farfar has announced that China's experience in the prevention and control of the COVID-19 provides a model to guide Tunisia. He also emphasized that the North African country attaches great importance to the development of bilateral relations between Tunis and Beijing. Adnan Chauchi, CGTN, Tunis.
Ethiopia has received over 500,000 masks from 5 Chinese companies and the Dongguan municipal government. The masks are part of a bigger donation of COVID-19 medical supplies, including disinfectants, thermometers and respirators. China says it is ready to support Ethiopia in its anti-coronavirus measures in efforts to contain the disease. China's ambassador to Ethiopia handed over the contribution to the Addis Ababa deputy mayor during a donation ceremony. He emphasized that the relationship between the two countries goes beyond that of giving out medical supplies. In fact, China-Ethiopia ties are part of a deep, comprehensive strategy that works both ways. The East African country has so far reported over 1,400 cases and 17 deaths.
The support between our two countries is mutual, not one way or one country at the receiving end. We support each other. So from above, we can see that the relationship between China and Ethiopia is really what our two governments called comprehensive, strategic, cooperative partnership. It is strategic as it will make a difference in our development, as its significance goes beyond bilateral. We aim to make our cooperation a model for China-Africa cooperation.
We are very grateful to the Chinese government, people and institutions for your support. We should take the necessary COVID precautions. But if the worst is to come, it's obvious that we need ventilators and ambulances. We hope your support will continue until Ethiopians triumph the fight against COVID.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. A French court orders trial of Rwandan genocide suspect Felicien Kabuga at a UN tribunal. And the United Nations welcomes resumption of Libyan peace talks.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
A French court has ordered Rwandan genocide suspect Felicien Kabuga be handed over to a United Nations tribunal for trial. His lawyers have opposed this, saying that he would not receive a fair trial at the tribunal, which is based in The Hague and in Tanzania. They also claim his health is too frail for him to be transferred to the African country. The court said his health was not incompatible with a transfer. The 87-year-old was arrested in Paris in May, ending a manhunt that lasted more than 2 decades. UN prosecutors accused Kabuga of bankrolling and arming ethnic Hutu militias during a 100-day period in 1994. 800,000 people were killed. He's indicted for genocide and incitement to commit genocide, among other charges. Kabuga has denied the charges. Rebels have killed at least 16 civilians in the northeastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Local officials in Ituri province say the victims were killed in an overnight attack on Tuesday. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more.
The attack happened in the DRC's northeastern territory of Jugu. The administrator of the area, Adela Lingi, says the victims included 4 men, 7 women and 5 children. They were killed by attackers using machetes and guns. Local officials have blamed the attack on members of the Cooperative for the Development of Congo militia group, CODECO. The militia is composed of members of the Lendu ethnic group that has had long-standing grievances with members of the Hema community. The 2 ethnic groups have been fighting over land and political representation for decades. The CODECO fighters have been accused of the massacre of more than 300 civilians since the beginning of the year. The latest wave of violence came a day before the Congolese army announced the killing of 18 CODECO militants. The UN says the violence has displaced more than 200,000 people in Ituri province. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Lesotho's former First Lady, Masea Tabane, has been arrested over the killing of her husband's ex-wife. This is after a Lesotho appeal court revoked her bail last week. It described the decision to grant her bail in February as a lack of consideration over the likelihood of witness interference. Tabane is being charged with ordering the killing of Lipolelo Tabane. Lipolelo was shot dead near her home in the capital Maseru in June of 2017. She was estranged from the recently resigned Prime Minister Thomas Tabane at the time of the murder. The former leader is also a suspect, although he has not been formally charged. He resigned last month amid mounting pressure following the case. The former First Lady's new bail hearing has been set for June the 6th. And some positive news now coming out of Libya. Warring parties have agreed to resume ceasefire talks. The UN mission to Libya says they will conduct the talks via video links due to the coronavirus pandemic. They will be based on 5+5 meetings involving 5 senior officers appointed on either side. The mission did not communicate when this will happen. The eastern-based Libyan National Army of Khalifa Haftar has been waging an offensive since April 2019. Haftar wants to topple the internationally recognized government of national accord based in the capital Tripoli. With the support of Turkey, the GNA has driven his troops out of several areas. The LNA has the support of the United Arab Emirates, Russia and Egypt. 2 ceasefires were agreed upon this year, but undermined by shelling and fighting. The UN Security Council is also yet to find an envoy to lead the peace process. The previous envoy, Hassan Salame, resigned in March.
The UN mission hopes the resumption of the Joint Military Commission talks will be marked by a return to calm and a humanitarian truce to pave the way for a lasting ceasefire agreement. The mission wants the resumption of talks to enable the competent authorities to focus on addressing the repercussions and threat of the pandemic and facilitate the response of local and international agencies to urgent humanitarian needs.
And for more insights on Libya, earlier we spoke to Sarah Kira. She's a Middle Eastern geopolitics specialist and researcher at the European Studies Institute of the CEU San Pablo University. We started by asking her what is at stake in the Libyan conflict as parties agree to talk.
Parties agreeing to dialogue or to sit and talk together means that both parties are drained in an endless conflict in Libya. It could also mean that there is international pressure on both parties to stop this draining conflict, military conflict, as we've witnessed in the past months, that it has turned, it's not only an ideological conflict between a military government in the east and another one, or the National Accord one in the west. It's not only ideological anymore, it has turned a military conflict, and it's draining both parties. Libya is a very rich country, and it's very rich in human resources and natural resources, and it has a place for everyone. If only this ideological and the concept of conflict over power, either it's a military or a Muslim Brotherhood one. This is why it's pulling different regional actors to support this kind of conflict. As you mentioned in your report, that there is Turkey on one side, in Egypt and UAE on the other side. These regional actors are there in this conflict because it is ideological to start with, but now that it's draining both sides, draining the region, it's going towards another Syria, another civil war in the region, and the region cannot take really any more civil wars in a vast and huge country as Libya. So this means agreeing to sitting down and talking is a very positive sign. If the insides of Libya or the inside parties of Libya really agree to end the conflict, there would be no foreign involvement as we witness it today. Hopefully these talks will result in more agreeing into ending the conflict and setting aside the foreign involvement, either it's from Turkey or from UAE and Egypt, because it should be ended from Libya first, in my opinion.
Prevention and treatment services for non-communicable diseases have been severely disrupted since the COVID-19 pandemic began. Many people who need treatment for diseases like cancer, cardiovascular diseases and diabetes have not been receiving the health services and medicines they need. CGTN's Daniel Arapmoy reports.
The COVID-19 pandemic and non-communicable diseases have brought about a deadly interplay. Services have become increasingly disrupted as African countries move from sporadic cases to community transmission of the coronavirus.
Because of COVID-19, there is a bigger impact on all the other diseases. We mainly call them as non-communicable diseases especially. You know, the highest mortality rate in today's world is because of non-communicable diseases. Even in Africa, by 2021, that is next year, it is being said that the biggest cause for death would be not the infections but the non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension and other diseases like cancer and respiratory illness.
According to the latest survey released by WHO, the impact is global, but low-income countries are the most affected. Many African countries are reportedly experiencing disruption in services for hypertension treatment, with 49% for treatment for diabetes and diabetes-related complications, 42% for cancer treatment, and 31% for cardiovascular emergencies.
Because of COVID-19, most of the hospitals are taking COVID cases, and then it is a bigger impact on the patient who is already immunocompromised with diabetes, hypertension or any kind of cancer for that matter. We are not able to admit them because of having COVID-19 cases in the hospital, because they are more vulnerable to get cases of corona.
Doctors say it will take some time before countries know the full extent of the impact of disruptions to health care during the COVID-19 pandemic on people with non-communicable diseases. What remains clear is that not only are people with non-communicable diseases more vulnerable to becoming seriously ill with the virus, but many are unable to access the treatment they need to manage their illnesses. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, Uche is now here with the latest business news. Uche.
Thanks, Beatrice. And coming up on Africa Live Biz, Nigeria backs the re-election bid by the African Development Bank president. And Nissan raises concern about maintaining its commitment to the EU without a Brexit deal.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Well, let's start off in Nigeria, where President Muhammadu Buhari is backing the head of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, in his re-election bid. Now, this is despite allegations of improper conduct against Adesina. The AFDB president has been accused of abuse of office by a whistleblower at the bank. Allegations include favoritism in hiring. Now, Adesina denied those allegations and was later cleared of wrongdoing in an internal investigation. But U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin signed a letter to the bank's board on May 22nd, rejecting the internal investigation. The United States, AFDB's second largest shareholder after Nigeria, is now demanding a new independent investigation, saying it has reservations about the integrity of the bank's process. And in South Africa, the competition watchdog has expanded its long-running rate rigging case to target other lenders, including some of the country's biggest banks. The Competition Commission has since 2015 been seeking fines against about 23 local and foreign banks. It alleges they colluded to coordinate activities when giving quotes to customers buying or selling the rand and the dollar. Now, those banks include Standard Bank, Nedbank, and First Rand. The country's antitrust tribunal concluded last year that it had no powers to charge foreign banks, but it declined to throw the case out altogether, asking the Commission to submit a new charge sheet. The Commission says it has met this obligation and in the process added 5 new banks to the case, taking the total to 28. And still in South Africa, the producer price inflation for March was expected to have slowed to about 3.5% year-on-year from 4.5% back in February. Now, this data reflects the first week of the national lockdown. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola with more on those numbers.
The overall March PPI data came in below the projected consensus figure at 3.3%.
So that's quite a sharp sit down in producer price inflation. Unsurprising though, given the environment. If anything though, there's 3 levels of truth going on here. It's the lies, damned lies, and statistics. Because this number is backward looking, it doesn't yet have the full impact of the very sharp slowdown in the figures.
Ironically, the local manufacturing sector is normally the first to feel the negative effects of a downturn in PPI.
Companies in the broader manufacturing sector in particular, and also the metals and engineering sector specifically, are operating under increasingly difficult conditions. And the decreasing trend in the PPI prevents companies from improving on already tight margins.
The mining sector, on the other hand, had a very different experience.
Coupled, of course, with the exchange rate, because the exchange rate has been weakening, started to weaken quite dramatically in March. So that enhanced the dollar prices that went up, plus then the exchange rate weakening actually gave us a little bit of a windfall in mining.
Perhaps the standout feature of the March data is the fuel price, which makes up a big component of the basket of prices measured.
makes up about 20% of the basket, and it shaved a large chunk off the inflation figure. That, of course, has got very little to do with domestic circumstances, but rather a consequence of the very big decline in oil prices in the earlier part of April into May.
South Africa may have escaped increased inflationary pressure when the April and May data is released because of the low fuel price.
At the time that the oil price has recovered somewhat, the rand has also recovered somewhat. So there's a bit of a seesaw going on in that big component.
The change to level 3 in the lockdown levels will also bode well for most sectors.
This will mean that they will operate under normal circumstances and robustly produce and sell their goods. So we are hopeful that this will have a positive impact on the numbers and will show in the numbers going forward.
One of the other big components in that basket of data is the food prices, but expectations of a really good maize crop mean that there's going to be lower inflationary pressure there. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's go to Somalia now. A new solar power plant in the country's capital, Mogadishu, is expected to quadruple the city's power generation. The plant will also be providing relief to businesses that rack up huge bills from diesel-generated electricity. Here's CGTN's Alexandria Majala with more on that story.
Somalia's energy sector is still relatively young compared to some of its neighbors. Beko, the nation's largest electricity supplier, has been producing 8 megawatts since March using solar panels bought from Germany and the United Kingdom. The firm expects to increase generation to 100 megawatts by 2022. For many, embracing renewable energy in the East African nation is long overdue.
Nowadays, the whole world, they are going to the green energy, and Somalia is one of the best places to install solar power plants. Why? Because we are getting more than 3,000 hours sunshine. You know, in Europe, they might get in less than 1,000 hours, and still they are installing solar. But in here, we have more than 3,000 hours. So it's a very good chance for all Somalis to install solar power plants.
Beko also transmits and distributes power in the Benadir, Lower Shabelle, and Middle Shabelle regions. The company says its new $40 million plant has already reduced electricity costs to 36 US cents per kilowatt hour, down from 49 US cents per kilowatt hour.
This is the third time that Beko has reduced its price. The last price reduction was announced a few days ago. I'm very happy about the discounts we get year after year. I have stable electricity for 24 hours now that does not damage my air conditioners and freezers.
Its solar panels now supply power for 4 hours a day to its 300,000 customers. The rest of the day, the company uses generators.
The usefulness of solar panels is that you invest one time and there's no running cost. And there's also limited maintenance. That's why there was a reduction in the price of electricity in Mogadishu after they were installed.
Somalia, which plunged into civil war in 1991, has no national grid. Each of its major cities is powered by private companies that largely rely on diesel generators. At the moment, Mogadishu's total installed capacity is at 35 megawatts against the demand of 200 megawatts. Before erupting into civil war, Somalia had a 70 megawatt installed capacity. Official data shows that at present, 85% of Somalia's population has no access to electricity, with 60% of them living in remote villages. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And now to some company news. Nissan, which operates the UK's largest car manufacturing plant, says its Sunderland facility will be unsustainable if the country leaves the European Union without a trade deal. Now, the Japanese company says that the EU was the Sunderland's factory's biggest customer, adding that it will be difficult to maintain its commitment if there was no tariff-free EU access. This is not the first time that Nissan has pleaded with UK and the EU negotiators. It wants assurances that 70% of cars manufactured at Sunderland, which are sold in the EU, can avoid tariffs of 10% under World Trade Organization rules. Now, Nissan has invested billions of pounds in the plant, which has about 7,000 workers.
We want to continue. We are committed. We have shown our commitment by launching the new Juke. We have shown our commitment by investing in the new press line for next Qashqai. We are doing everything which makes sense to the country, to our employees, to the economy of, to our customers in Europe and in UK. Having said that, if we are not getting the current tariffs, it's not our intention or not our intention. The business will not be sustainable. That's what everybody has to understand.
Well, moving on, many countries, including Thailand, are trying to kickstart their business sectors. But the global supply chain remains a huge problem, mainly because of restrictions caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the roadblocks include border closures and weakened transportation links. Here's Tony Chang reporting from Bangkok.
Workers at an aluminium pressing plant in central Thailand hoist massive rolls of sheet metal into place, ready for the presses to stamp them into shape. Their biggest client is the auto trade, big brands like Toyota and Honda that have factories here. But since the coronavirus crisis started, the orders have dropped off sharply. Factories have shut down and the supply chain has broken.
The sales is decreased about 70 or 80%. It is impact a lot, like in auto industry. Like there are many parts that need to be supplied from many places around the world. Like if you miss only one small part, the car cannot be assembled.
Now the company is trying to manufacture buses and boats for sale in the domestic market. But in these troubled economic times, buyers are hard to find. At the container port in Bangkok, little is moving in or out. Thailand, like many countries in Southeast Asia, has flourished as a major part of the global supply chain. Although the health crisis appears to have been averted here, the economic impact may be devastating. Honda, who have a huge factory in Thailand, have posted their lowest earnings in 4 years. Although manufacturing is starting to resume, problems in the supply chain have slowed production to a trickle. And with huge question marks over global consumer spending, expectations for the future are bleak. Faced with these difficult circumstances, many multinationals could well make the decision to move back to their base of operations.
The company will ask whether do I reinvest in the original location or do I go back home. There may be the administration will give me some tax breaks or some subsidies, and that will reduce my cost.
So is this likely to mean the end of globalization?
No. I think we will see a rebirth of globalization in a different form.
That may be true, but to rebuild the trade links lost in the past months could take years, and many companies will not survive. Modern Thailand, like many countries here in Southeast Asia, built itself on exports and trade as commodities were shipped down the Chao River into the Gulf of Thailand and all across the world. But the coronavirus has broken those links, and at this stage it's very hard to see when they'll be joined back together again. Tony Cheng, CGTN, Bangkok.
Well, that is all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, Egypt further eases its nationwide lockdown with a possible return of domestic flights next month. More on that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's coming up. Children from Shine Kibra Television in Nairobi report on the importance of hand washing in preventing COVID-19.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore.
CGTN. See the difference.
Washing your hands with water and soap has been recommended as the first line of defense against COVID-19. But this could be a challenge where water is a limited resource. In the informal settlement of Kibra in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi, young journalists from Shine Kibra TV reported on that story for CGTN. Take a look.
How do you protect yourself from the coronavirus when running water is limited and living conditions are crowded? In informal settlements like Kibera in Kenya, this is a challenge. But the young journalists of Shine Kibera TV are focusing on the solutions. They reported for CGTN from their home in Kibera on how kids are learning to protect themselves from COVID-19. Take a look.
Bruce is a young man from Kibera. He is an actor and a scriptwriter. With the recent pandemic, all places of gatherings including theaters and social halls are closed, which means Bruce is not working as usual. He has now put his energy in teaching kids how to prevent themselves from getting the virus, by teaching them how to wash their hands. This is the easiest and cheapest way to prevent the virus.
Give them the knowledge to sanitize, to wash hands, and how to keep good hygiene. I think that's a better way. Prevention is better than cure.
The kids are learning bit by bit.
Ukishamaliza kunawa, haushiki coronavirus.
The kids then learn how to keep a social distance and a proper way of coughing.
Nimejifunza kunawa na kuweka social distance mahali penye kuna crowd ya watoto.
I realized they do not have masks. Bruce says their parents don't see it as a priority.
You know, here there's things like budgeting that comes along. Someone prioritize, should I buy the mask or food and stuff like that. And also they're limited, the masks are limited.
Bruce urges people to stand in unity and support one another.
If there is someone out there who sees the urge and the need here in the ghetto, should give that he has, he should share with others.
It might look like a drop in the ocean, but these are the little things we can do to change the world in a big way. From Kibra, I am Sylvia Adhiambo.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Niger and Burkina Faso cancelled 2019-2020 season over COVID-19.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Football leagues in Burkina Faso and Niger have been cancelled due to the coronavirus pandemic. The West African nations opted to forfeit the 2019-2020 season and domestic football competitions after considering options at their disposal. CGTN Sadiq Shaban has more.
Members of the Emergency Committee of the Burkina Faso Football Federation decided to cancel the 2019-2020 season of the National Football Championship. The league was only 6 days away from conclusion, but the decision was taken following increased cases of coronavirus infections in the West African country.
I am disappointed with the cancellation of the championship because we were leading. Our wish was to win the championship when it resumed. I was convinced we were going to win the title finally, but it's too bad it did not turn out the way we wanted. But we are taking the federation's decision with fair play because we are in a COVID-19 pandemic period.
It was a unanimous decision approved by club officials, representatives of the professional league and the country's Ministry of Sports, following an advisory from the Confederation of African Football.
We are in an exceptional period where we are facing a pandemic that is COVID-19, and all the decisions we take at this time of the global pandemic must be made in the public interest. Population health is more important than sport. Our wish is that the disease will disappear so that people can return to football and sport in general.
It was a similar move in Niger, where the Emergency Committee of the Football Federation cancelled the first division season with less than 2 weeks to its conclusion.
We simply decided to cancel the season and better prepare for next season. We told ourselves that the pandemic is still there. The respective measures decided by the government are still in effect. Football is very important to us. Many people make their living from it, but we told ourselves that health and the preservation of human life are above all else.
Two teams, Akokana and Olympic Niamey, were leading the league with 47 points each when the season was cancelled after 26 rounds of matches.
It goes without saying that CAF itself will be pushing back its calendars. But in any case, it's going to be complicated in both seasons. In Niger, we really have a problem aligning the program with the CAF calendar. It's really an opportunity for us to align ourselves with CAF's 2020 to 2021 calendar.
The two countries are now back to the drawing board, trying to figure out how their council leagues will be aligned within the broader continent football calendar. For teams and players, the season cancellation means that there will be no promotion and relegation this year. Sadiq Shaban, CGTN.
The Kenya Football Federation President Nick Mwendwa has said he is now waiting for direction from the World Football Governing Body FIFA over the fate of the postponed elections of the local body. On Wednesday, Mwendwa, who is seeking a second term, accused the chairman of a local tribunal that has postponed the exercise twice of meddling with affairs of the federation.
A tribunal has become a consultant for FKF elections. So FKF did not attend. We wrote to him and said we are not party to it, and we will not be party to it. So I want to say this. I want to ask John Ohaga, the chair of the Sports Disputes Tribunal, to stay away and steer clear of football election matters.
In Spain, Real Madrid players continue training this week as the restart of the country's football league looms. The La Liga season kickbacks into action with a local derby between Sevilla and Real Betis on June the 11th and fixtures for the following 7 days, with Real playing at home to Valencia on June the 18th. Like the German Bundesliga, which became the first major European league to restart after being disrupted by the coronavirus pandemic, all La Liga